Welcome to Altar of the Demo Gods. If you're wondering what advice from two experienced sales engineers sounds like, it's a little like this.
We're back for episode 5 of Altar the Demo Gods. I'm Keith Wilson, joined by my friend and co-host, John Morton. John, how you doing?
Living that dream, Keith. Living that dream.
Yeah, you know, we recorded, we go a little behind the scenes very quickly in episode 4 already. So we record these in batches. And every couple weeks or every other week, John and I meet and we'll record several episodes at a time. So the last episode we did was the first episode we recorded for this week, where we talked about our last week. So that's why some of these episodes you're going to hear us banter and talk about, what we did last week, and other ones it's going to be just kind of getting into it. But we can recap last week's episode a little bit, and I really liked it. John, what were your thoughts? We were talking about personality traits, core competencies needed as an SE to be successful.
Yeah. So reflecting back on that, I always love harping on communication skills and being able to simplify a very complex message. Those are my keys to anything.
Yeah. Well, you even simplified communication for us, right? As 2 ears, 1 mouth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what we need to focus
Listen
on.
more
Ask
than
the right
you talk.
questions, shut up and listen.
Yeah, listen more than you talk.
Yeah. If you walk out of a meeting as a sales engineer and you've done most of the talking, you just had a really shitty meeting.
1000% agreed. Actually, that's a excellent opportunity to calibrate an SE who probably had diarrhea of the mouth.
Yeah. Or it's just a bad meeting. Like, yeah, sometimes an SE, well, most of the time it's going to be the SE just talking too much. But other times it's just a bad meeting where the SE has been trying to fill in the void with just everything, and the customer is silent, not giving anything, closed off, that sort of thing.
I imagine it. You ever watch the movie Gremlins? I think it might have been in the first one, right? I love that movie. Great, some excellent characters, Mogwais, right? But I always remember this one.
Those things were adorable.
This one gremlin, dude, when they became gremlins, and he's like in a bar or whatever, and he shows up in his trench coat, and he like yanks it open, and he's flashing everybody. And gremlins don't even have genitalia.
Oh yeah, that's where he makes that.
You don't want to do that in sales. You don't want to show up in your trench coat and yank it open and show everybody everything you got, because you're going to get that same response.
You don't want to show your genitals.
You're going to get the same response where people are going to be like, what just happened? This is not what I wanted.
Right.
Yeah, we don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
That gremlin, if you will.
Right. So we talked about communication. We talked about demoing. We talked about just having competency in the technical area in which you sell. Right. So that was a great episode 3. If you want to go back and listen to that. And this one, I want to spend some time, and I don't even know if there is a difference, but I want to talk about it there is a difference, I guess, but in selling SaaS products, PaaS products, and we joked about this earlier. I don't know how to say it, so I'm just going to say IaaS products or IaaS products or infrastructure as a service products, and we'll define the acronyms as we go. Or on-prem. Right. So I personally only have experience selling SaaS or software as a service and on-prem.
Gotcha.
What about you? What experience do you have?
Let's say you have experience, mainly the same realm, right? On-premise. And let me take a step back and kind of break it down. So like across the enterprise or even business to consumer, even the platform that we record on right now is a SaaS product, software as a service, where someone's kind of saying, we're going to offer you our software you can use for a subscription fee, and you pay for that. And we give you a service, right? So they record our podcast for us. We can distribute it, share it, cut it up. These sort of ideas persist, whatever the technology is. On-premise is the same idea. You can develop applications. It doesn't even have to be in software. Me and Keith are trying to bridge that gap to other worlds, right? You may sell mechanical valves. You may sell nuclear reactors. You may sell, fishing gear. It all is something that people are consuming. So when we talk about the, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, what we're talking about is the technology spectrum of, hosted environments that are normally subscription-based, where someone is consuming that service and they're getting the reduction of the overhead of maintaining it. What does that mean? On-premise, traditionally, that meant you had to have people who managed the data centers, server farms, tons of employment of people who just kept the lights on, trading that off.
Yeah, well, yeah. I needed a space in your rack to put my, my pizza box
Correct.
server, right?
So,
and if you were lucky, it was only a 1U space, right?
Then I had 5U and 3U.
Talk to some of those. Talk to some of those route switch guys, and they can take up half a rack, right? Well, I'm gonna have to bleep that so we can put it. We can keep this as the
network guys love it, but I know what you mean. But so let me deviate just for a second. So the year right now is 2023, and what Keith's talking about with servers when we used to rack them in a data center. The last time I was in a data center was in 2015 in Hawaii, Oahu, Hawaii. I got a special badge, went in. Last time I racked a 3U server, I remember it to the day. Think about how much things have changed in those past few years, where as technology advances, we just want to focus in on whatever is the most current or, whatever we're selling that supports that tech stack. Right?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people have the on-prem experience if they've been doing this for a while, because things are going... A lot of stuff is going away from on-prem. A lot of infrastructure is being sourced out to Amazon through AWS, through Google, through GCP, through Microsoft, through their cloud services, where you don't need to have your own infrastructure anymore for a lot of it, right? You can set up your own. I'm even messing around with something for work right now, and we're not going to go too far down this because it gets us too far off topic. But using Terraform and Ansible to create these environments for me, right, and setting up these flexible and dynamic infrastructures that are part of infrastructure as a service. And I want to hit on each of these before we go too far, because what I would hate is if we got to the end of the episode and we didn't talk about what each of these things were. So infrastructure as a service is things like I just mentioned too. So like Amazon EC2, their own route switch, they provide VPN services, all IAM services, all sorts of stuff
you normally do inside,
I only know
right? If you think of on-premise, infrastructure as a service is the closest thing to that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then there's PaaS or platform as a service. I have a little bit of experience with this, but I think any developers or SEs that work with development tools would be more familiar with this, because that's where you see that. That's where you see things like Heroku or Vercel that, if I have a website where the front end is running on I think it's the Next.js framework. It doesn't really matter. I separate the front end UI from the back end, and Vercel, right? And Vercel hosts that front end for me. But it's also a coding platform that can manage my code, that interacts with GitHub. It's a full sort of software development type platform. That's what PaaS products tend to be. And then there's SaaS. There are so many SaaS products, and I think that's what most people are familiar with.
I agree.
Spotify is a SaaS service, software as a service, right? I use Spotify to listen to music. A lot of the apps that you subscribe to on your phone are SaaS products.
I just had this thought experiment, and I never thought of it until now, Keith. What would you consider, like, I don't know, maybe we can look it up on the fly right now. software as a service of social media. Is the Instagram thoughts that some of our listeners may be looking at, is that a software as a service or a platform? I don't know.
So it's not platform as a service, and I don't necessarily think it would be software as a service because it's, well, I guess it could be just with a different revenue model. It's gonna have a real. We should get some folks from sales leadership on here, or especially those that have like startup experience, because there are very specific legal definitions around software as a service. Like if you actually go through and read the boring parts of your contract, there's certain things that are in there that are required for software as a service type things.
Well, I think of it too, because we get advertised SaaS stuff on Instagram based on your algorithm, and we're not going to ever do a live preview of mine because we all might get arrested for what's advertised to me. But a lot of the stuff that's advertised on there is SaaS services, where Instagram is using their platform to advertise to you these SaaS offerings. So I didn't mean to deviate, but the net of it is it's hosted somewhere. It's hosted in the cloud. They're providing a service. You can subscribe to it. We won't even go into OnlyFans, right? But that's the net, right? They're simplifying the overhead of having to do all the management on the back end of network switching, routing, all that sort of thing, hosting, and they're offering it to you as a service.
Okay. So I think the things that us and people are most familiar with then will be SaaS and on-prem, right? Those are going to be
I work for a SaaS company
things
now, so yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so do I. We do have an on-prem offering as well. Generally, if you work in security and sell to governments, you have to have some sort of on-prem.
Archaic.
Generally.
Chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's what do they call it? FedRAMP or something like that as well, where you can get into their cloud. But
all this difficulty of we need it in our own data
even then,
center.
they still don't want it.
Even then, you can do everything they want. They'll still say no. Keith.
So what I'm wondering for you as a sales engineer is what did you notice any difference in that transition from selling these on-prem appliances, aside from having to go and physically rack them, to selling SaaS products?
Yeah, I love that question. Number one, other than the fact that I had an excuse in 2015 to book expenses to Hawaii because I was the only one qualified to rack a server in the data center. And that did take me all of 1 hour, but 7 days of travel time. That was one advantage of on-premise. Moving to SaaS was pricing too. So bringing it back to kind of a sales-centric model. Back in my day, I feel like Abe Simpson every time I do this podcast, man. I'm a lot older than I look for people that don't know me, right? They meet me at bars and I still get ID'd. But we used to sell what was called perpetual licenses, meaning you bought the right to use our software for a certain amount of time. And that was the on-premise world. And the dollar values were actually exponentially higher. So as an example, we would...
Well, yeah, because we had to charge you for hardware and supporting that
hardware, right? Because we hosted our software, right? So dollar value-wise, and I'm just using a random example, a deal I could close would be $5 million. The change to IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, DaaS, data as a service, that's another one, is exponentially less. So you go from $5 million perpetual, meaning a one-time deal where everyone got paid on that, to now a subscription-based model where maybe $500,000 a year. So the incentives and initiatives are radically different. We're not just all focused on winning that one perpetual deal on-premise. Now there's a lot more involved with SaaS. We care about churn. We care about renewals. We care about upsells. It's a little different. I feel like it's a little better for the consumer, the buyer, to buy in this model. They get a way better deal overall. And for, the vendors, it's a little different based on that subscription sort of model.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're talking about operational expense versus capital expense, OpEx versus CapEx. It was so much. So I found it definitely reduced the friction in selling between selling on-prem and selling SaaS, right? One of those reasons being the OpEx versus CapEx difference. And I'm not going to get into what the difference is between those because I am not smart enough in accounting terms to explain those. But operational expenses are generally just ongoing expenses that the business needs to operate. SaaS gets classified as operational expenses. That is so much easier for at least security teams to get budget for, right? I imagine most technology teams can get. It's easier to get operational expense budget than it is to get capital expense budget. Not exactly sure why. I just know that it is. Also, there are less people involved in the decision to buy or not to buy a SaaS product versus an enterprise product because we're removing hardware from the equation. You no longer have to have something in a data center, and now you've got your guy that runs the data center and his boss and 5 other people from other IT teams need to now be involved just because you have a physical appliance in a data center. Now those people no longer need to be involved. Right. Yeah. It's that frictionless selling.
And when you decrease the dollar value of the actual purchase, which is hilarious, there's a lot of things. We need to have a guest like this out there where they're selling a product that they can sell for like $5,000 a year subscription. Dude, like somebody can literally expense that on their credit card if they're a director level. $5,000 is nothing to them. So it's very easy for them to transact and just bring it into their environment. Like you said, Keith, no even red tape. I bought it on my credit card. We all start using it. Bam, it's the model. That is amazing for a lot of sales teams.
There's so many products that I use for work that I don't bother to even ask and I'm a director, but I don't bother to ask my boss for. Because they're SaaS products, they've been able to price themselves so low and they've made the sales process incredibly frictionless along the way. And we see companies starting to adapt this product-led growth model that kind of fits that model as well, right?
Yeah, 100%.
It's
so it has made it easier, like I think, so shifting from on-premise to the cloud, for end users and consumers, especially if you have a very simple product that you can, like he said, if you're a director or above, normally you have an expense account, you can just expense it and nobody even asks. That is really good for those teams.
Right. What about the POC? How much easier is a proof of concept or proof of value or whatever the you want to call it? God, I did it again. Whatever you want to call it. That's all right. I'll bleep it out. I'm just going to mark it here so
remember.
I know.
It's the excitement, Keith. You're bringing the excitement into the podcast.
That's what I do at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. Got to bring the excitement, bring the heat.
Yeah, so back to your point about the POC, and normally by POC we mean proof of concept, right? So anybody who's ever bought anything, and I'll use an example of a car, right? You're going to buy a nice minivan, right? You got your girlfriend pregnant and your wife doesn't know, and her demand is, I need a new vehicle. You go to the car lot, you want to buy her minivan. You normally want to drive it first, right? Yeah, make sure it has working things. It is what it's expected to be. A proof of concept's no different. When you're buying software, most folks want to test it out. Does it work as expected? So with SaaS and cloud-based models and product-led sales, that's the goal. You want to give it to someone, they can download it, they can test it out, validate it based on their success criteria very quickly, and make that $5,000 purchase the example we keep using up until now. So this has made POCs to some degree easier for consumers. On the flip,
you can. So if it's a traditional POC, because there's still plenty of SaaS services that aren't necessarily go sign up with a free account and do your own stuff, but it's still kicking off a proof of concept with a customer is still a million times easier with SaaS than it ever was with an on-prem. Because with an on-prem, I've got to ship an appliance to them, or I have an appliance that I'm going to deliver in the trunk of my car, right? Which I hated doing because it's like, okay, I've got a $50,000 to $250,000 computer sitting in my car. That makes me nervous, right? this thing's worth more than my house, and I'm driving around with it, and that's that's where you get worried. So you had to physically get an appliance to the person. Then you had to get space in the data center, get an IP address
get
for
the
it.
approvals.
How long would it take just to get an IP address for it?
Jeez, man, just to get
an IP address could take,
like they have to
take them a
give
month.
you a badge, things like that, right? Yeah, figure out the logistics of shipping it. If you're shipping it out of country, y'all can do research as listeners. If you're ever shipping things to certain countries, there's rules around like encryption rules, like in Brazil and like China, where you have to have some third party handle the appliance, and it was just a nightmare logistically. But to pivot on that a little bit, Keith, so what I liked about that, though, what I really liked about that was if someone was willing to go to that effort of going through it and say, Keith, put that $250,000 computer in your car and drive down to Lexington, Kentucky and install it for me, they were pretty serious about buying. What I don't like about the modern cloud world and, SaaS and everything else is buyers don't have to be serious. Buyers can literally waste our time and download products, do their thing, and still say no. At least then we knew they were pretty serious,
Yeah, I suppose, the amount of work that would go into a POC on both sides at that point, they'd have to be pretty serious. But I mean, I don't think the solution for that is stop SaaS, obviously, right? It's, we need a better process for how we vet
sales process.
our
Exactly.
customers.
So that's where sales process matters, because every customer under the sun, they are used to this sort of buying. They're like, just let me download the product and test it myself. I'll let you know if it works for me. Well, guess who that doesn't work for?
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me. Right? As the selling person.
Yeah, well, and I mean, let's be real. Most enterprise products, you can't just download and then run. Like, if you have zero experience with it, you're going to not be successful, and you're going to wonder why the product sucks. And it's not that the product sucks, it's that
And the worst
suck.
part is they're going to write a bad review.
And I mean that in the nicest way
They're going to write a
possible.
bad review on the AWS marketplace about the experience they didn't even ask help for. So now you got like a 1-star review on AWS because of this, So
Yeah. Enterprise products. And then on-prem, you also have to, there were always technical problems, right? You have to worry about updates getting to it.
Keith,
there'd just be so much.
extends my time in Honolulu by at least 3 days because the internet wasn't good then. I mean, it was good. I'm not gonna lie, but from a selfish perspective as an SE, I got like a 10-day holiday to do a POC in Hawaii.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but let's be real. How often does that happen? Because most of the servers I racked were in Chicago or Minnesota in the middle of winter.
well, you got to go break everyone's heart.
They weren't in Hawaii. They were in a nondescript building in the middle of friggin' Wisconsin.
Why you got to break everyone's heart, man? We're selling futures here, all right? But it did happen.
You're selling romance that only exists occasionally.
And people pay for that on SaaS solutions like Adult Friend Finder and Tinder and stuff. So we'll leave that alone.
All right, John. I think this has been a great discussion of IaaS, SaaS, PaaS, and on-prem. Catch us again next week, where we're going to be talking about sales frameworks, and I guarantee that Medic. We haven't done an acronym this week or last week. We're going to do it next week though, when we talk about Medic, MedPick, and other sales frameworks here on Alter the Demo Gods. Have a good week.